Are back. I'm sitting here trying to read fast and furiously through the latest issue of the TrendsJournal. Gerald, Zeke didn't get this over to me until about a half hour ago, and the paper's still warm from the printer. I'm seeing here history repeating itself. You wrote in the TrendsJournal here that the parallels were eerie. The crash of 29 was mirrored by the panic of '08. And it was the Great Depression back then, and it's the Great Recession/Depression now. Do you draw parallels between 29 and short selling the stocks and all of that?
Well, not so much on that. I don't know a lot about that, but I do know that there were also currency wars. And now you hear the talks of currency wars coming from whether it's Brazil or coming from Europe, about the nations that are debasing their currencies so that the exporters could export more. And then you're hearing more about trade wars heating up. So we're seeing the parallels that are very clear to us, that the world is heading toward the next great war, the first great war, actually, of the 21st century. And what they do, as we see it, is when all else fails, they take you to war. And as everyone knows, there was none of the programs that FDR or anyone put in place during the 1930s was getting us or the world out of the Depression. It was the World War II that boosted the economy, the war economy, and after that, the rest is history.
Yeah,
so history's repeating itself.
So after the war, all the men came home. They wanted to get married and make babies, and tract housing was invented. And, well, we had some fairly enjoyable times during the 50s, save for another United Nations war, and that was called the Korean War, which it really wasn't a war any more than Vietnam was a war. That was another UN operation. And, Gerald, I think it's missed on about 99% of this population in this country that this whole Middle East thing, the History Channel screwed up. They did a documentary on us in our first foray into the Middle East, going after Saddam Hussein because he broke a deal. They were slant drilling into his oil fields out of Kuwait. A deal was struck with Daddy Bush, and all was supposed to be right with the world, and Saddam said, you know what, I think I'll just take all of it. So that was the first start. But as I looked at this, and then the History Channel came up with this wonderful little map showing, well, it was NATO that was there, that is true, and it was our coalition buddies, the people that want to get together and gang up and go beat up on sovereign nations without an actual declaration of war. But on the map, Gerald, was little United Nations pins all over the place. The first and only and last time that I ever saw any indication that this was NATO, UN, kind of a mixed garb of let's go beat up all the towelheads in the Middle East.
Well, it's the United States, and NATO is just they do what the United States tells them to do. We're the big power. I mean, you look, for example, we compare Turkey's military to the UK's. I think it's like twice the size. So when you look at the rest of the NATO nations, their militaries are minor compared to us, and they just bring them on, as I see it, to make it seem as though this is outrage from around the world. And the History Channel should have started a little bit earlier than that. They should have started around 1948 with the creation of Israel. And again, I don't want anybody calling me and telling me I'm an anti-Semite because I'm saying what they don't like, just like I'm not an anti-American if I say what people that believe the government don't like. And that's really, as I see it, the root of so much of this. And what's going on, for example, right now in Syria, I mean, that has to do totally with Iran. And, of course, we know the problems that Israel has with Iran and the United States has with Iran. And Iran, as far as I know, they haven't attacked anybody in the last couple of 100 years. And as a matter of fact, you mentioned Saddam Hussein in the first Gulf War. How about that lovely war started by Jimmy Carter against putting Iraq and even Rumsfeld later going over there to hand those spurs to Saddam Hussein to start the Iraq war against Iran.
Well, and ironically, you should mention this because last night I was just musing the good old days that Ron Paul was running for president, and the political pitch or fever in this country was a bit higher than it is now. Now we're just sick of it all. But I remember him being on Bill O'Reilly's program and giving him a history lesson in Iran and talking about us toppling the government in '53 by way of CIA. And the rest of the story goes, and he cut him off and told him, look, I don't need a history lesson here. Well, yes, you do. Because before the United States was in there, the good old Brits, if you look at the Middle Eastern map right now and the boundaries that were drawn up, thanks to our British cousins across the puddle. By the way, Gerald, if I ever have anybody say, well, that's anti-Semitic, I just point something out to them. I say, because I read a story and I go after a Catholic priest in a certain diocese that was predating off of your little children doesn't make me an anti-Catholic. So if I can't come out and talk about bad Jews like orange juice or grape juice or anything else, or anybody else that's doing something out of the ordinary, I just refer them to the previous statement. I mean, this.
Yeah, I tell them to basically screw off.
There's another factor as well that I think we need to look at, and that is that Iran is one of two nations left, or now that Iraq's gone, that doesn't have a central bank controlled by the crown, and basically their central bank is an Islamic bank, and they basically are forbidden by Islamic law to charge interest. And I think that's a major issue.
Well, yeah, it is. And you remember they were saying that, we'll sell oil to anybody as long as you convert it into gold. We'll deal with anybody on the planet. They didn't want the United States dollars. All of what and Gerald, I don't know if I got your complete take on this, on the oil bourse or the Bretton Woods Agreement. Magically, after World War II, we all knew that people were going to be gearing up economically. The banks were going to have tons of money in which to loan countries to fire up their economies. And with one little caveat, that all the world's trade in oil has to be done through U.S. dollars. And when we went into Iraq, I want people to remember that oil was $27 a barrel. Now it's up over 100, and it's going to stay there, and it may even go up in the future.
Yeah, well, that's, of course, and we look at the Bretton Woods Agreement and talking about the Depression, and what people don't realize is that, Europe was destroyed after World War II. Japan, there was nothing left of Japan. China, China wasn't involved in anything. Russia was having their own problems. So the United States was the world power. We were the undisputed world champ. We could call the game. That's not true anymore, and we're on a very fast downward slope. And as again, what we see coming up, when all else fails, they take you to war. And again, talking about Iran and the overthrow of Mossadegh in 1953, the oil companies that were in charge were Standard Oil and Anglo-Iranian Oil. They changed their name. Now it's BP. So it's the same group, and now, of course, it's ExxonMobil. And it's always about money. It has nothing to do with morality. And the hypocrisy, for example, of Obama being called a Nobel Peace Prize winner is as ludicrous as the Europeans awarding it to all of Europe this past year.
Well,
what a joke.
And who else got the Nobel Peace Prize? It was that fine black fellow out of Africa, Nelson Mandela. They just recently discovered that the guy was a communist.
Well, at least he didn't wage wars and kill other people like these guys did. How about that lovely little humanitarian mission in Libya? Overthrowing a sovereign nation.
Well, and subsequent to that, and I'm sure you're aware of this, Ambassador Stevens, you wrote in your journal here that Susan Rice is begging out of that position. She's not going to be taking over for Hillary. But Stevens was involved with getting the heavy weaponry out of Libya and sending it to guess where? The opposition to Assad's Syrian government.
And of course, also, look at all the weaponry that left Libya and now went into Mali and destabilizing that as well. And the Islamists are taking over the entire region. So everything that the world leaders do ends in failure. And when you look at what's going on in Washington, for example, I ask everyone to tell me when the discussion happens, you tell me one thing that Washington has done that they could prove as a success. Education, healthcare, wars. Oh, great wars. You mentioned the police action in Korea. What was it they had a name for it in Vietnam. Of course, it wasn't
Tonkin
a war.
Gulf Resolution.
What was it?
The Tonkin Gulf Resolution.
Yeah. They always have a name for this, humanitarian missions, but everything they touch, they turn to disaster.
Well, I can't see of one thing that the federal government has ever done on a sustained basis that didn't turn into an absolute disaster. And we're led to believe that, oh, that's just politics, and politicians make mistakes. When have they ever gotten anything right, is my question. Let's reverse it. It'd be easier to go through that very, very, very short list. We'll be right back. Well, Hillary Clinton, of course, had the flu and got a little dehydrated and got a little dizzy and kind of fell over and bumped her little head. And she can't give testimony day after tomorrow, Thursday, with the commission she set up, supposedly, to find out what happened in Libya with Mr. Stevens, supposedly the ambassador over there. And these orders, from what I've been able to determine, Gerald, it has been, that was directed from the White House. And I don't know how much longer the American people are going to sit idly by and watch this criminal element continue to operate. You mentioned the shootings the other day. And the first thing out of my mouth after I saw the president get up and shed a few well-placed and well-timed political tears, the first thing out of my mouth was, you damned hypocrite. You know, claiming that these are our children and the government has to do things to protect them. And I'm thinking about the billions of dollars that we send to Israel while they're still mowing down Palestinians. I'm looking at Iraq, and the former Secretary of State, Madeleine Albright, admitted in an interview on 60 Minutes that, yes, an acceptable loss of 500,000 children in Iraq, that was acceptable collateral damage. And I'm thinking about the families that are being destroyed in this country by way of this insane monetization of the debt in this country. And I'm thinking to myself, you damned hypocrite.
Well, we're thinking along the same lines, and I do Trends in the News features each day. It's part of the subscription to the TrendsJournal, the video broadcasts. And that's precisely what I began with. I said they're going to blame this on guns and call for gun control when it first happened. And, of course, they'll look for the psychological causes, which will be there. But, of course, they will not mention the drugs that this kid is on or any of the others that so many of the other mass murderers have been on. And they're a matter of record. You know, I'm not making this up, whether it's Paxil or Ritalin or Zoloft, one after another, these kids have been on them, and mass murderers snapping out. And then you watch these moronic drug commercials on television, and they tell you, side effects may be suicide.
Yeah,
guess what? It ain't just suicide taking yourself out, it's taking everybody else out around with you.
Well,
and then the other comments that I made as well is that the fish rots from the head down. And this is a nation that glorifies war and kills indiscriminately with bombs and drones because they can get away with it. That's all. So what they do is they help set the example. Oh, they just last Monday, one of the drones killed a, quote, suspected militant in Pakistan. Oh, and by the way, his wife and daughter were collateral damage. Who cares about the 1 million people that were killed in Iraq? They got dark skin. Who cares about them? The hypocrisy. And then I heard from Netanyahu, and it was on the media, that Israel is shocked at what happened in Connecticut. I'm shocked about all the Palestinians that he killed a few weeks ago.
The thing is too, if you look at the kid that reportedly did the shooting, he had Asperger's syndrome. And Asperger's syndrome, one of the symptoms is clumsiness, and yet somehow or another he was able to carry with him, it looks like about 200 rounds of ammunition, which weighs about over 30 pounds, 3 guns, full military gear, along with a jacket. I mean, the guy was carrying his own body weight. He sat in his basement playing video games. He wasn't at the gym lifting weights. So it was quite a feat. They found 2 other shooters, purportedly, alleged shooters that got away. The kid asked to be let in to a closet. He was obviously probably afraid of being shot by one of the people he went there with. I mean, the list goes on and on of the inconsistencies here.
Well, I want to play a short clip of Lieutenant J. Paul Vance of the Connecticut Police that admonished people yesterday about Twitter accounts and the information you're sending over. And this is Command Central. Now, what he was in reference to were saying that other people were involved in the shooting or misidentifying people. And I can understand that. But this was a complete and total lockdown on all the information. The man made reference, and we'll hear it in a clip. He says, this is the command center for information. Whatever comes out of these microphones I'm standing in front of, that's going to be it. What was really going on here, there were a lot of questions being asked by people that have seen the multitude of the videos, of which I played excerpts of yesterday on the program, of all of these mass shootings going all the way back to Texas in 1966. Of what these people were on. And one of the examples that I gave was Andrea Yates out of Dallas that drowned her 5 kids in a bathtub. Well, she just happened to be on Flexor and Remeron. Diabolical stuff. At any rate, we'll take the break, be right back. Gerald Celente, Paul Drockton, John Statmiller, right after this. Now, this is the Connecticut police spokesman in Newtown. Let me get that right. And what has been discovered leading up to this press conference, which was supposed to be live, but it was actually delayed by Fox News 5 minutes. And I can only speculate as to the reasons why they were delaying that. But information, Gerald and Paul, has come out from a WABC helicopter, actual film footage, that the cops were chasing a camo-clad individual through the woods. They got him down. They cuffed him. I've actually heard the actual transmissions, radio transmissions of the police when they first arrived on scene, taking down another suspect, had him in a prone position, had him cuffed. In the meantime, the guy that supposedly did all this damage is lying dead inside the school, taken supposedly by his own hand. Now, there's a problem in mainstream media. We all know how they like to selectively lie by omission. And one of the biggest things has been these shooters that all have been on these mood-altering drugs. I played clips yesterday that was absolutely ghastly of people calling in. One man called in to the police department. Dispatcher is on the line, said, "Can I help you?" The man says, "I just shot and killed my $2. They're dead on the floor." And the dispatcher says, "Sir, are you on any medications?" And he goes, "Yes, I am." And he was medicated to the hilt. And he was making a call as if somebody had just thrown a rock through his front window. I mean, people become totally disassociated. They become aggressive and they become murderous one of the little downsides, I guess, from the psychiatrists and psychologists are looking out after our welfare. Here is this clip from the spokesman from Newtown.
Police State News.
One thing that's becoming somewhat of a concern, and that is misinformation that's being posted on social media sites. It is important to know that we have discussed with federal authorities that these issues are crimes. They will be investigated statewide and federally, and prosecution will take place when people perpetrating this information are identified. Again, all information relative to this case is coming from these microphones, and any information coming from other sources cannot be confirmed, and in many cases it's been found is inaccurate. So I simply, that's the newest twist today, that we want to make sure that's perfectly clear that social media websites that contain information relative to this case are not being posted by the Connecticut State Police, are not being posted by the Newtown Police, are not being posted by any authorities in this case. So any of that information and people that are putting that information up there in any manner, all right, that can be construed as a violation of state or federal law, will be prosecuted, will be investigated and prosecuted.
Yeah, that's from Lieutenant J. Paul Vance. Now, to be fair, he was talking about misinformation, identifying incorrectly suspects. The first day of this, I saw the shooter, that it was somebody else's face there. And I can understand the concern that they may have with people sending the wrong information. But how many times have we gotten the wrong information from law enforcement? We have gotten the wrong information from mainstream media. How many times? And if it were not for the internet and blogs out there, the majority of this country would still be boiling in its own stupidity.
We did receive from the media. First, it was the kid buzzed his way in, and the principal let him in because his mother was a kindergarten teacher there. And then we find out the mother wasn't a kindergarten teacher there, and the kid didn't buzz his way in. He blasted his way in and broke his way in. I mean, how about that for misinformation? How about calling by the wrong name?
Well,
Ryan instead of Adam.
Well, and there was a news clip. They were leading somebody away that was cuffed. He obviously wasn't dead if he was cuffed and walking. That was dressed exactly the same as the shooter inside the school, and he's proclaiming his innocence, going, "I didn't do anything." But yet there was not one word from the state police, Newtown police, any police, that was saying that, look, we have a couple of people under arrest here, and we're questioning them right now. What happened to the other guy that the cop tackled, threw down, and cuffed? That was a total of 3 people on scene, but yet this is what I think is happening. I think that the Internet is serving at lightning speed, getting information out before they can, how should I say this, groom it for public consumption.
Well, of course, they always do. I mean, everything is twisted. You know, by the way, just to go back to the Benghazi issue and Hitler having falling and having a concussion.
Yeah.
When an ambassador, a so-called ambassador, a CIA operative, whatever he was, when he gets killed, it's a big deal. But when Tammy Smith gets blown up in a Humvee, or Pedro Gonzalez, gets his legs blown off in a roadside bomb in Afghanistan, or Tom Smith, gets his brains blown out by a sniper rifle in Afghanistan, and that doesn't make any difference. But boy, when one of them gets taken out, let's have a hearing. What happened over there? How come one of our guys got hit?
Yeah.
What a bunch of hypocrisy.
Paul, you were going to say?
Yeah, I'm just going to say that if you take a look at who these kids were, both the father of this Newton, Connecticut alleged shooter and the Aurora shooting, James Holmes, both of them are scheduled to testify in the LIBOR scandal.
And
so
that's interesting because...
I didn't know that.
Yes, that's what I'm sharing with you, gentlemen. Because, first of all... Father
He asked, how do you know that?
No, I said I didn't know. I said I didn't know that.
Okay, sorry.
I'm quoting from the article here.
Okay.
And it says the Father
Newtown... I
Newtown...
haven't heard that. That's really interesting.
Well, and also Geithner's on the hot seat, and they're going after him. What part did he play in the LIBOR scandal?
Yeah, I mean, the bottom line is that you take a look at the bankster connection. I mean, clearly, the other thing that hasn't been talked about, and, obviously you can probably spend 6 hours talking about, is the fact that the CIA was involved in creating Manchurian candidates throughout the 50s and 60s. And basically the shadow government has been involved in using these individuals since the assassination of Robert Kennedy.
Well, and here are things, and I always preface this by saying that we can take the peripheral evidence and it points in a certain direction. But until, and this will happen if the good guys win in this country, that there's going to be people rolling like you would not believe, blabbing their full heads off to try to save their keisters. You won't have to double tap them in the knee or anything else. They're going to be rolling and giving information to keep their keisters out of prison. And Paul, we have enough fact on the table that we can just look at what is going on. By the way, did you also know that the Joker's father out there in Colorado, he was also involved heavily within the government and also in mind control projects themselves. And if he was, in fact, being tapped to testify either on his own behalf or against people that were involved in the LIBOR scandal, it just makes it makes it conspiracy driven. But these are facts that we cannot readily prove. One day, oh God, it's going to take us probably a quarter of a century to weed through all of what this country has been through, and to bring to trial and justice those still alive that were involved in some of the most treasonous activities that you could imagine. Our country is literally being run right now by a criminal element. We have a man seated in the White House right now that believes he's emperor, that he can do whatever he damn well pleases. And it is a sad state of affairs, but, and again, I will say this, not if we win, when we win and we get this country back. I don't care. I don't care if I've had all my legs and arms blown off, as long as I could stuff a pencil in my face and be in a jury box and press the guilty button. I don't care. I want to be around when the criminals start rolling and they start freaking and they start going to jail. And one other thing that they don't know, all these world-class criminals, all these globalists themselves, they will have one inherent flaw in their little ring knocker groups. And that's that these people will literally eat their young. So have at it. There's something more treacherous than a pissed-off American that's armed to the teeth. And that's the people that you're dealing with right now. So either way they go, they're screwed. But their arrogance will not let them admit it. And there's two things that don't go well. Arrogance and self-awareness. Never will you find the two. So...
Well, I'll tell you, John, Peter Lanza is Vice President and Tax Director at GE Financial. Father of the Aurora, Colorado movie theater shooter, James Holmes. Is Robert Holmes, the lead scientist for the credit score company FICO. So clearly, these are high-level banksters.
Yeah, and they had the inside skinny. But why go through all of the things? I mean, was this a double-purpose thing? What do? Get these, pump them up on medications and have them go out and commit heinous crimes to do what? I mean, usually when the wet teams go out after people, yeah, they threaten your dog and your cat, and if you don't play fair or you play by their rules, things might happen to your family. But why go through all of this in order just to do away with a few people? I mean, it makes no sense to me. I mean,
to me, this kid, I don't know. No one really knows. We only could speculate. This is a disturbed kid, come from a broken family, And everyone admits, even the state police, that the kid had mental health problems. Now the latest reports are that the mother was going to send him to someplace, I believe in Washington, or get him committed to a hospital, and this was his response to it. But when you go over the list, from Eric Harris, who was 17 years old, first on Zoloft, then on Luvox, he was one of the Columbine shooters.
Right.
Dylan Klebold, they never released his medical records. And then you have Jeff Weiss, age 16, prescribed 60 milligrams a day of Prozac, 3 times the average starting dose for adults, when he shot his grandfather, his grandfather's girlfriend, and fellow students in Red Lake, Minnesota, then shot himself, killed 10, 12 wounded. You go down the list.
Yeah.
And every one of these kids was on either Prozac or Zoloft or Luvox or Ritalin. And to me, this is the big cover-up for Big Pharma. And it's destroying the nation. I get a kick out of this baloney. Don't legalize marijuana. That could be that could lead to worse things. Nobody's died of an overdose of
marijuana,
being on smoking a joint. You know.
Yeah.
And they haven't killed people over it.
Well,
but you look at all the people that are doing time because of it, and the big-time money is making billions of dollars of profit, and here's what's going on, and this is a fact. Because all our social programs are breaking down, because the whole family units are breaking down in this country. I was a kid that grew up, and my father, may his soul rest in peace, was home at 6 o'clock, and we all had dinner, around the table, and my mother, a very quaint idea, may her soul rest in peace, stayed at home, so when the kids came home from school, she was there. A very quaint idea.
Yeah.
And now you have society that's totally broken up. So what's going on? These kids that are growing up with single parents, with families that are totally dysfunctional, there are no PALs or CYOs or YMCAs taking in these kids like they used to in the old days. Now these kids, their mother's whacked out on meth. They don't know who their father is. They're drugged out, and they go to school. Oh, guess what? They misbehave at school, and they cannot be. They're out of control. So you know what they're doing now? They're drugging them up. They're drugging them up. This is a fact. Instead of dealing with the problems, which are almost unsolvable because of where these kids come from, they're just whacking their minds out on these drugs. And then you figure it out, and you keep going down the list. What are they eating? What are they drinking? They're eating a lot of crap. That's what they're eating. Their brains are floating in corn syrup. So they're out of control. The whole nation is going under.
The other thing, Gerald, when you look at John, when you look at the big picture here, is you got to look at the agenda. I mean, we know the economic collapse is at the door. We know this country is going to fall into chaos because of it, and their goal is to make sure we don't have guns when that happens, because guns means accountability. And the one thing they don't want us to be able to do is hold anybody that has brought about the destruction of this nation accountable. So that's why they want to take away our weapons.
And I've got phone calls. I want to get these in because Gerald has a very limited time with us. But I have spent a lot of time, and check out republicbroadcasting.org, a lot of information up there about the drugging of these kids and the adverse effects. And you're right, Gerald. I posted a story the other day. 3 teens in western Pennsylvania, man and a woman, were out. In the story they were called feral teens, asked the guy for a cigarette, and the woman looks at her and remarks, "Look, you want to smoke cigarettes, go get a job." At which point one of them pulled out a gun and killed her. Now, we're being told that in order to keep we got to make changes in the structure. You might have to give up a few more liberties. You might have to give up some gun rights here in order to be safe. Bull. I am not going to do that. The difference between a citizen and a slave As a citizen is armed, the slave ain't. Let's go to the phones here. First up, Vince in Indiana. Hello, Vince. How you doing?
Hello, John, and hello, Gerald. I just wanted to say, I work for the United States Bankruptcy Court here, and I can tell you that I think that, because we have bankruptcies for Chapter 7s and Chapter 13s for individuals that are going skyrocketing. And one of the things they don't want to tell you about is this foreclosure stuff. And they keep dribbling out stuff, like the reverse mortgages. People are getting foreclosed upon those things. And then, and they delayed the process back on mortgages that are underwater. At the end of this year, that's going to end. And, there's going to be 1099-Cs going out for debt cancellations, and people are going to have to pay taxes on it they can't afford. And there's going to be 20 to 30 million people going to fall into that. What do you think that's going to cause?
All right, did you get all that, Gerald?
Yeah, it even gets worse than that when you keep putting other information on top of it to build on to the foreclosures and what's going on. All the people that have lost their jobs, then you look at the elderly people who have lost all their retirement. And now you have interest rates at 0%. You put your money in the bank and you lose money, considering the interest they give you back on it. Now these people can't pay their property taxes. They can't pay their school taxes. This is America? Yeah, put a K in it rather than a C.
Well, and Ben Bernanke came out the other day. We were all wild-eyed running down the street at Mach 3 with our hair on fire, conspiracy theorists. Ben Bernanke came out the other day and said that, unemployment figures, and they're looking at U3, not U6, the total, but they're looking at the unemployment figures and going, the unemployment is 7.7%. When it gets to 6.5%, we'll stop quantitative easing. Maybe. And I'm thinking to myself, if the American people really knew the truth and the amount of debt off of these derivatives, collateralized debt obligations, you throw it all in that pile.
And adding on to that when he talks about that, again, what Vince was saying about all the foreclosures that are piling up, and then you put the other elements on top of it that no one's talking to, and we call this a country, when you take people's homes away from them, because that maybe they bought when they were, people in their 70s and their 80s that bought these homes maybe for $39,000, $49,000 years ago, and now they're paying taxes over all those years that quadruple the cost of what they paid for that house, and now they can't pay for it, and they're being thrown out. And on the quantitative easing baloney, and Paul was mentioning the LIBOR scandal before, wasn't that wonderful? They rigged the interest rates. No heads rolled, nobody goes to jail, and now after Bernanke announces more QEs, gold prices should have skyrocketed.
And they will, but they're suppressing it.
But they're suppressing it because the game is rigged at every level. Whether they lie from the police telling us what really happened, whether they lie about LIBOR, whether they lie about what the real unemployment rate is, whether they lie about the, quote, impressive progress they were making in Afghanistan after Obama sent 33,000 more troops, whether they lie about what they got with, quote, enhanced interrogation techniques, they're liars. They're psychopaths and they're sociopaths, and you could call them Mr. President, Mr. Senator, and Miss Congressman.
Well, this whole thing, Gerald, and we got a few more calls. I want to get to them before you leave us. We have a very simple solution to the fiscal cliff and the budget deficits right now. Social Security would not be threatened. Medicare, Medicaid could stay in place. We wouldn't need Obamacare. We just shut down the 900 military bases that we have in 130 countries. We pull our troops out of the Middle East. There will be plenty of money for research and development, for weaponry, whatever. We would not be threatened. We could balance this thing on top of the debt. Well, that's kind of a misnomer. They talk about balanced budgets, but they never bring forth the other debts from prior years. We just focus on the budget this year. I mean, this whole thing is people have had it. John Bonnier, he's done himself out of politics. He will not get reelected. The Barbara Boxers of this world, I'm waiting for these people to keep putting these clowns back in office to wake the hell up and stop doing it.
It's not only an American problem. Look what they just did in Japan. They just re-elected a guy that helped destroy the country before, and now he's gearing up to take him to war against China as the United States keeps building its Asian presence.
But that just tells me, Gerald, that the Japanese people are just as well informed by their media as we are in this country.
And there's no radiation leaking out of Fukushima.
None at all. Now, forget those, forget that beef that's showing up in American restaurants, that if you turn the lights out, it will actually glow in the dark. Larry in Washington. Hello, Larry. Larry, you there?
I think it was Paul that made a comment concerning the two fathers. And the program right before you, he debunked what Paul said.
Okay. I didn't hear the program, and I'm not going to spend the next 5 minutes of the airtime here with Mr. Celente.
I know, but I'd like to find out if
I'll give you the source. I'm going to give you the source of the information right now.
Okay.
This came from the National Finance Examiner. The National Finance Examiner. That's where the story's from. So if someone has a beef with the information, that's the source.
We'll ferret it out, Larry. Anything else?
Much.
Okay, thank you. Anthony in New York. Hello, Anthony.
Hello.
Hi.
How you doing, sir? Just a couple of quick points about the Connecticut shooting. I'm sorry it's not financial, Mr. Celente, but one thing is
that's Celente.
Mr. Celente.
One
yes.
thing you don't do to a good Italian is mispronounce his last name.
He's Anthony. He may be Italian.
As far regarding all the footage that they've shown over the past few days with this Connecticut incident, whenever one of the helicopters have zoomed out, even an hour after the incident took place, my question to what the public should be looking at is why wasn't there was only 2 ambulances on site with a shooting of 27 victims, which to me seems, if in fact it did take place, the initial response should have been at least much more than that. When you have a mass shooting, there should have been a lot more than 2 ambulances within 4 blocks when that helicopter zoomed out.
Well, and I just wanted to explain that WABC, which some have suggested was a drone, but I don't know about that, but there is actual film footage of them taking another suspect into custody, getting him on the ground, putting the cuffs on him, and walking him out of there. I still want an explanation over that one.
And the second thing is, why was the hospital on lockdown? Now, I have a theory as to that. Now, the hospital was just 4 blocks away. The news had said that nobody was allowed in or out of the hospital.
Hey, hang on 1 second, Anthony. I've got to say goodbye to Gerald Celente here. TrendsJournal, ladies and gentlemen, TrendsJournal.com. Gerald, you're an important contribution to this Tuesday show. One of these days, we're going to have to get you to ante up, maybe do it a couple times a month, but I do so appreciate your time, sir.
Thank you very much, and Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays to everyone.